Welcome to the deep dive. We're all swimming in this ocean of information today, right?
Absolutely. It's constant.
Yeah, news, reports, headlines. It's just relentless. And trying to figure out what actually matters, what you need to really know, that's tough. It feels like a full-time job sometimes.
It really can. Sifting through the noise is the biggest challenge.
Exactly. And that's where we come in. This is the deep dive, and our whole mission is to, well, cut through that noise for you. We do the sifting, pull out the crucial bits, the surprising facts.
Those aha moments.
Precisely, those moments.
Right.
We want to give you a shortcut, basically, to being genuinely well-informed, but without making your head spin. This is tailored for you.
Making sense of complexity.
Yeah. So today, we're diving deep into India. We're looking at the big picture, recent progress, the evolving landscape across, well, pretty much everything. Health, science, how it's governed, the economy.
And its place in the world, its global footprint.
Right. We're drawing on some pretty detailed reports from May 2025. Our goal is to give you clear summaries, but also those memorable details that stick with you, so you really understand what's going on. Ready to jump in?
Let's do it. It's definitely the fascinating time for India. A lot of acceleration, both inside the country and on the world stage. Maybe we should start with the basics, the foundation, health and social progress.
Sounds good. Laying the groundwork. Okay, health. And right off the bat, there was this one statistic that really caught my eye about cervical cancer. Did you know India accounts for a quarter of all global deaths from it?
Yeah, it's a staggering figure. A quarter that really highlights the scale of the challenge there.
It's huge. So what's the response? What's India doing about it?
Well, that massive burden has definitely spurred a strong national reaction. There's been a big push, including a review of their own indigenously developed HPV test kits for screening.
Ah, so developing their own tests, that's significant.
It is. It's not just about tackling the disease, it's a step towards medical self-reliance, too. The WHO has this global strategy, right? They want 70% of women screened by 2030.
Right. 2 tests in a lifetime, I think.
Exactly, usually around ages 35 and 45. And given that, like you said, maybe 1 in 5 women globally with cervical cancer is from India, well, these homegrown initiatives are incredibly important.
Makes sense. Domestic solutions for a domestic challenge.
And it fits a broader pattern. Think about nifithromycin, that's India's first antibiotic, developed entirely domestically. It signals this wider push for medical independence across the board.
Okay, so cervical cancer is one major focus. What other big public health campaigns should we know about?
Another really significant one is the National Zero Measles Rubella Elimination Campaign.
Zero, as in completely eliminate them.
That's the goal. They're aiming to eliminate both measles and rubella by 2026. It's ambitious, definitely.
Wow, how are they tackling that?
Primarily through aiming for 100% immunization coverage. It's part of the Universal Immunization Program, the UIP. Kids get 2 doses of the MR vaccine.
When did they get those?
The first dose is usually between 9 and 12 months old, and the second one comes between 16 and 24 months.
And is it working?
The progress seems pretty impressive, actually. So much so that India received international recognition for it, the Measles and Rubella Champion Award back in 2024.
Champion Award. That sounds like serious recognition.
It really is. It speaks volumes about their commitment to child health and the effectiveness of the campaign.
That's genuinely good news. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Tuberculosis, TB. That's been a global fight for a long time, hasn't it? The WHO declared it a global emergency way back.
They did back in 1993. And yes, TB remains a formidable challenge globally and certainly for India.
So what's India's current game plan for TB? And crucially, is it making a dent?
The main strategy revolves around the National TB Elimination Program, or NTP. And they recently had this intensive campaign, the 100-day TB Mukarat Abhiyan.
TB-free India campaign.
Right. And the results, according to the latest WHO Global TB report from 2024, are actually quite encouraging. Between 2015 and 2023, India saw an 18% reduction in new TB cases.
18%. How does that stack up globally?
It's actually double the global rate of reduction over that period. And mortality from TB declined by 21%, with treatment coverage reaching about 85%.
Okay, that's significant progress.
It is. And this program, the NTEP, it's evolved quite a bit. It started way back in 1962 as the National TB Control Program. The latest iteration is the Pradhan Mantri TB Mukt Abhiyan, launched in 2022.
And what's the ultimate goal? What's the vision?
The big vision, Laid out in their National Strategic Plan for 2017 to 2025 is a TB-free India by 2025.
By 2025, that's very soon.
Extremely ambitious. It means aiming for 0 deaths, 0 disease, and 0 poverty linked to TB. It's built on 4 main strategies: detect, treat, prevent, and build capacity.
Detect, treat, prevent, build.
Okay, what's really interesting, though, are the support initiatives they've built around the medical treatment.
Oh, like...
Well, there's Nikshay Poshan. This gives about €1,000 per month directly to every TB patient during their treatment via direct benefit transfer.
Cash support. For nutrition, I assume.
Exactly. Nutrition is so critical for recovery. And then there's something called Nikshay Mitra, which translates to TB Friends.
TB Friends.
Yeah, it's a cool concept. It basically mobilizes civil society, NGOs, companies, even individuals to adopt TB patients, in a sense. They provide extra nutritional support, help with job skills, sometimes even psychological support.
Wow. So it's really tackling the social and economic side effects, too, not just the disease itself?
Precisely. It recognizes that TB isn't just a medical problem. It hits people on multiple levels. It's a much more holistic approach.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, and sticking with health successes, I heard some positive news about trachoma as well.
Yes, absolutely. Another big win. India received formal recognition from the WHO at the 78th World Health Assembly for eliminating trachoma as a public health problem.
Trachoma. Remind me, what is that exactly?
It's a contagious bacterial eye infection. It's actually classified as a neglected tropical disease, an NTD. If it's not treated, it can lead to scarring of the cornea and eventually irreversible blindness.
Right. So eliminating it as a public health threat is huge.
Massive. And it didn't happen overnight. It's the result of years of sustained, focused effort under their national program for control of blindness and visual impairment.
How did they confirm the elimination?
A key part was conducting a very thorough national trichomatous trichosis survey. They did this across 200 districts that were known to be endemic, following WHO guidelines. It was systematic screening and treatment that got them there.
Impressive. These national health wins, like trachoma, really make you think about India's role globally, don't they? These aren't just domestic stories.
That's a really important point. They're not happening in isolation, and India is definitely playing a bigger role on the global health stage.
How so? What's an example?
Well, India was a strong supporter, key player really, in adopting the world's first global pandemic treaty at that same 78th World Health Assembly.
The pandemic treaty, right, that's been in the works for a while. What's the main goal there?
The core objective is pretty clear: to seriously strengthen the global health system so the world is better prepared for future pandemics. Prevention, preparedness, response.
And crucially, equitable access, right? To vaccines, treatments.
Exactly. Ensuring fair access to health products during a crisis is a central pillar. What's interesting is the framework it sets up: international cooperation, sharing resources, a system called Pathogen Access and Benefit Sharing, or PABS.
PABS, how does that work?
It's basically a system to ensure that when countries share pathogens for research, say during an outbreak, they also get fair benefits back, like access to the vaccines or treatments developed from them. It includes financial coordination, too.
Okay, that sounds crucial for fairness.
It is. The treaty also pushes the One Health approach, recognizing that human, animal, and environmental health are all linked. And it includes mechanisms for building capacity globally, especially for R&D and manufacturing of vaccines and therapies.
What about national sovereignty? That was a big sticking point for some countries, wasn't it?
It was, and the treaty specifically preserves national sovereignty. The WHO can't impose domestic policy mandates on member states. That was a key point, especially for India.
So what happens next with the treaty?
The next step is hashing out the details of that PABS system through an intergovernmental working group. Once that's adopted, the treaty opens for countries to sign and ratify. It needs 60 ratifications to actually come into force.
60. Okay, so still a ways to go, but a significant step.
A very significant step towards a more coordinated and hopefully more equitable global health response system.
Okay, let's broaden the lens now beyond just health programs. Let's look at the bigger picture, the demographic shifts, the social fabric of India. What are the big surveys telling us, like the Sample Registration System report?
Right, the SRS report for 2021. That's a huge demographic survey. It really gives us a detailed snapshot of India's population dynamics, birth rates, death rates, all the key indicators.
And what are the main takeaways? What's changing?
Well, one of the most striking things is the fertility rate. The total fertility rate, or TFR, that's the average number of children, has dropped to 2.0 nationally.
2.0. Isn't replacement level fertility usually considered 2.1?
Exactly. So India as a whole has reached replacement level fertility. And it's not just national. 16 states and union territories are also at or below that level. This is a major demographic transition.
What does that mean in practice?
It means the population structure is changing. The proportion of young children, the 0–14 age group, is declining. It went from over 36% in 1991 down to about 25% in 2021.
And the working age population?
That's increasing. The 15 to 59 age group is now up to over 66% of the population. And the elderly population, 60 plus, is also growing, now around 9%. This shift creates the potential for a demographic dividend if the workforce is skilled and employed.
But also challenges down the road with an aging population, right?
Precisely. It's a double-edged sword that needs careful policy planning. We also see societal shifts, like the average age of marriage for women increasing to 22.5 years.
What about mortality rates? Any progress there?
Significant progress. The maternal mortality ratio, MMR, has dropped dramatically. From 130 deaths per 100,000 live births a few years ago, down to 93.
93? That's much closer to the SDG target, isn't it?
It is. The target is 70 or less by 2030. Some states like Kerala, Telangana, Tamil Nadu are already doing exceptionally well. Child mortality rates, infant mortality, under 5 mortality have also declined significantly.
It's still high in some areas.
Yes, there are disparities. Kerala typically has the lowest rates, while states like Madhya Pradesh often have the highest. But the overall trend is downward towards the SDG targets. It still means, though, that about 1 in every 37 infants doesn't survive their first year.
1 in 37. Still a stark number. What about sex ratio at birth?
That's shown a slight improvement, up to 913 females per 1,000 males, from 907 previously. Kerala is highest here, too, Uttarakhand lowest. Interestingly, the urban ratio is slightly better than the rural one.
And life expectancy?
It's now around 69.8 years overall for the period 2017-21. Women generally live longer, about 71.6 years compared to 68.2 for men.
Okay. And one more key indicator, where are births happening?
Institutional deliveries, births in hospitals or clinics, are now very common, around 91.1% overall. Higher in urban areas, slightly lower in rural, but still a huge improvement reflecting better access to healthcare.
So these numbers paint a picture of progress, but also complexity. How do these trends connect to broader human development, and especially that persistent issue of inequality? What does the Human Development Report say?
That's where the Human Development Report, the HDR for 2025, provides a really crucial, maybe sobering perspective. India's overall HDI rank did improve slightly, up to 130 out of 193 countries, so it's in the medium human development category.
Okay, improvement is good, but...
But when you adjust that HDI for inequality, using the inequality-adjusted HDI, or IHDI, India loses a massive 30.7% of its human development value.
30%, that's huge. What does that loss actually represent?
It represents the gap between the average level of development and how that development is actually distributed among the population. It means the benefits of progress are not being shared evenly at all.
And you see that in income.
Starkly. The poorest 40% of Indians share just over 20% of the national income, while the richest 10% hold over 25%. That's a significant gap.
What about poverty beyond just income, like multidimensional poverty?
The Multidimensional Poverty Index, or MPI, shows about 16.4% of the population living in multidimensional poverty, meaning they face deprivations in health, education, and living standards simultaneously. Another 18.7% are considered vulnerable to falling into it.
And gender inequality.
That remains a major challenge. India ranks 102nd on the Gender Inequality Index, the GII. Female labor force participation is particularly low, only 35.1%, compared to over 76% for men.
How do they measure this inequality generally?
They use metrics like the Gini coefficient, where 0 is perfect equality and 1 is extreme inequality, or the Lorenz curve, which visually shows the distribution. There's also the Palma ratio, comparing the income share of the richest 10% to the poorest 40%. All these point towards significant inequality in India.
So why does this inequality persist despite the economic growth? What are the root causes?
Oh, it's complex. There are deep-seated sociocultural factors, like the gender pay gap. Women earn only about 18% of men's labor income in India. Then there's unequal access to quality education and healthcare.
And the nature of the growth itself.
That's a factor, too. Sometimes it's jobless growth, or there's a missing middle problem where small businesses struggle to grow. Sectoral imbalances play a role. Agriculture employs over 40% of the workforce, but contributes only 15% to GDP. The rural-urban divide is widening.
Labor policies, the gig economy.
Yes, those contribute too. The rise of the gig economy often means less job security and fewer benefits. Even tax policies can sometimes favor capital gains over labor income. And then you have external shocks like climate change and COVID-19 hitting the most vulnerable the hardest.
It sounds like a web of interconnected issues. What's the proposed way forward to tackle this?
Well, the report suggests things like national inequality reduction plans, dedicated strategies, progressive taxation where the rich pay a higher percentage, an inclusive wealth approach that values natural and human capital, not just GDP.
And addressing those social barriers.
Absolutely crucial. Things like gender budgeting, ensuring policies specifically benefit women, improving access to quality education and health care for everyone, and strengthening social safety nets. It's about making growth truly inclusive.
Okay, let's zoom in on one specific aspect of inequality, urban poverty. It's a huge issue in a rapidly urbanizing country like India.
It really is. And you see interesting initiatives trying to address it, like the SAHAYOG program in Odisha state.
SAHAYOG, what does that do?
It's quite practical. They basically go door to door in urban poor settlements, identify eligible people who are missing out on welfare schemes, and help them connect and get access.
That sounds vital, especially with the scale of urbanization. What are the projections?
They're massive. By 2050, India expects about 877 million people, half its population, to be living in cities. Urbanization has nearly doubled since 1951.
Has there been progress on reducing urban poverty?
Yes, quite remarkable progress, actually. Extreme urban poverty, using certain metrics, dropped from nearly 11% in 2011-12 down to just 1.1% in 2020-23. The Gini index for urban areas also improved slightly, and urban unemployment fell.
But urban poverty is different from rural poverty, isn't it?
It presents unique challenges, things like poor housing quality, lack of access to basic services like clean water and sanitation, overcrowding. There's also a psychological impact, the feeling of relative deprivation when you live in a slum, maybe like Dharavi in Mumbai, right next to immense wealth.
Why does it persist so stubbornly in cities?
Often due to unplanned rapid development. Continuous migration from rural areas strains resources. Regional disparities matter. Poverty might be worse in smaller Tier 2 or Tier 3 cities than in the big metros. And a huge issue is migrants often lacking the documents or proof of residency needed to access Social Security schemes. It creates a vicious cycle.
What government programs are trying to help?
There are quite a few. One Nation, One Ration card is meant to help migrants access food rations anywhere. Swachh Bharat Mission Urban focuses on sanitation. PMA Urban provides housing assistance. Danolam supports livelihoods. PMS Vanidhi helps street vendors. Emerald improves urban infrastructure, the Smart Cities mission. There's a lot happening.
But the way forward needs more.
It needs truly inclusive urbanization, focusing development on smaller cities, not just megacities, making urbanization sustainable, and critically, empowering the urban poor through skills training and ensuring Social Security actually reaches them, especially migrants. Cities are the economic engines, so their health is crucial.
A complex picture, but definitely efforts underway. And let's end this section on social progress with a really positive highlight on literacy.
Yes, a fantastic achievement. Mizoram, a state in northeast India, recently declared itself India's first fully functionally literate state.
Fully functionally literate, what does that mean?
It means, according to the latest PLFS survey, they have a literacy rate of 98.20%. It's a testament to focused educational efforts and a real beacon for other states.
98.2%. That's incredible. Okay, let's transition now. Let's talk about the care economy and how digitalization is changing things, particularly for women.
Right, the care economy. That term covers all the work, paid and unpaid, that goes into caring for people, kids, the elderly, the sick. It's fundamental to well-being.
And women do a disproportionate amount of this work, especially the unpaid part.
Hugely disproportionate. In India, studies suggest women do nearly 8 times more unpaid care work than men. And this work is often invisible, unrecognized, and undervalued.
But digitalization is starting to change that dynamic.
In several ways. Firstly, it's creating new economic opportunities within the care sector itself. The UN estimates that investing in care could create 300 million jobs globally by 2035. And maybe 70–90% of those could go to women.
Can you give an example?
Think about platforms like Urban Company in India, which connects customers with service professionals, many of whom are women, providing services like cleaning, beauty, repairs, often forms of care work. It's become a huge employer.
So, more jobs. What else?
Digital tools offer more flexibility, which can be crucial for women juggling care responsibilities. Digital payments provide more stable income. Online platforms offer learning and upskilling opportunities. And technology can make accessing care services, like childcare, more efficient. You see platforms like Clay or Broomies emerging for that.
So it's about both creating jobs and making care work more visible and potentially more manageable.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the value of this work and using technology to empower the women who predominantly perform it.
That's a really interesting intersection. And shifting focus slightly, what about support for India's senior citizens, ensuring they can age with dignity?
There are several initiatives focused on aging with dignity. A dedicated senior citizen welfare portal has been launched, which acts as a one-stop shop for accessing government schemes, healthcare benefits, and other resources online.
Easier access through digital means? What else?
There's continued support for senior citizen homes, providing residential care, operating under the Maintenance and Welfare of Parents and Senior Citizens Act. And interestingly, there's a new partnership, an OU, signed with the Brahma Kumaris spiritual organization.
Brahma Kumaris, what's the focus of that collaboration?
It aims to promote emotional well-being, mindfulness, and importantly, intergenerational bonding among senior citizens, addressing the social and emotional aspects of aging.
And any recognition on the international front?
Yes. Kozhikode City in Kerala recently became a member of the WHO's global network of age-friendly cities and communities. That's a network of over 1,300 cities worldwide committed to making urban environments better places for older people to live. It shows a growing focus on this important demographic.
Okay, this brings us nicely into our second major section, India's push on innovation and environmental stewardship. And this is where things get really cutting edge, even reaching for the stars, literally. Let's talk biotechnology first.
Right. India's biotech sector is really taking off, and it's being driven by a national policy called BioE3.
BioE3, what does that stand for?
It stands for Biotechnology for Economy, Environment, and Employment. A pretty clear statement of intent.
And how's the sector doing?
It's booming. India is now ranked 12th globally in biotech and 3rd in the Asia-Pacific region. The bioeconomy itself has seen explosive growth from about $10 billion back in 2014 to nearly $166 billion in 2024.
Wow, $166 billion, and they have targets for future growth.
They do. An ambitious target of $300 billion by 2030. And it's not just about value. India is the world's largest vaccine producer, remember, and it has the 3rd largest startup ecosystem globally, with many biotech startups.
So what specific initiatives are fueling this under the BioE3 policy?
Well, they've launched India's first publicly funded BioFoundry in collaboration with the International Center for Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology, ICGB. This is basically a platform to help scale up bio-based innovations.
A biofoundry, like a factory for biology.
Kinda, yeah. A place to test and scale up processes. They've also set up these Moolankaran hubs. These are focused on cutting-edge, data-driven research that integrates artificial intelligence with biology.
AI and biology, for what kind of applications?
Across key sectors.
Yeah.
Health, agriculture, environment. Think precision medicine, climate-resilient crops, new environmental remediation techniques. The BioE3 policy itself prioritizes 6 areas: bio-based chemicals, functional foods, biotherapeutics, climate agriculture, carbon capture, and even futuristic marine and space research.
Space research. Okay, that brings us to the really fascinating part. How is biotech connecting with India's space ambitions?
This is genuinely groundbreaking stuff. Under this BioE3 policy, India has announced its first ever space biology experiments. And they're going to be conducted aboard the International Space Station, the ISS.
On the ISS?
As part of the upcoming ISS Ek Iomin 4 mission. An Indian astronaut, Group Captain Shubhanshu Shukla, will be part of the crew conducting these experiments.
What kind of experiments are we talking about?
2 main ones focus on sustaining human life in space. First, a study on microalgae-based nutrition. They want to see how microgravity and space radiation affect the growth of edible microalgae. Could these be a sustainable food source for long space missions?
Algae as space food. Okay. And the second one?
That one involves cyanobacteria, specifically spirulina and syngicoccus. They'll study their growth for potential use in waste recycling systems in space. And they'll also assess spirulina's potential as a nutritional superfood in that environment.
Waste recycling and superfood, that's practical. Who's involved in this?
It's a major collaboration. ISRO, India Space Agency, NASA, India's Department of Biotechnology, DBT, and the ICGE in New Delhi. It really highlights how India is integrating its strengths in biotech and space exploration, pushing scientific boundaries.
Truly pushing boundaries. Okay, let's come back down to earth now and talk about fundamental environmental policies. What's happening with those big international agreements on chemicals and waste, the BRS conventions?
Right, the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm conventions. India actively participated in their recent Conference of the Parties, the COPs, in 2025. The theme was Make Visible the Invisible, which is quite apt for chemicals and waste management.
Remind us quickly what each convention covers.
Sure, Basel deals with controlling the movement of hazardous waste across borders and its disposal. Rotterdam is about prior informed consent, ensuring countries agree before potentially hazardous chemicals are exported to them. And Stockholm aims to eliminate or restrict persistent organic pollutants, or POPs, those nasty chemicals that stick around in the environment and harm health.
Okay, so what were the key outcomes from the recent meeting?
They updated guidelines for managing POP's waste, agreed on a new strategic framework for the Basel Convention, and importantly, added several new chemicals to the restricted lists under Rotterdam and Stockholm, things like certain pesticides and industrial chemicals.
So strengthening controls.
Yes, tightening the regulations. However, these conventions face challenges. Sometimes trade interests clash with scientific advice, making it hard to list certain hazardous substances. There are also issues with overlapping rules between treaties, and countries sometimes request too many exemptions.
So progress, but challenges remain.
Definitely. But despite the hurdles, these BRS conventions are absolutely critical. They provide the main global framework for managing chemicals and waste throughout their life cycle. And they're essential for achieving several sustainable development goals related to health, water, cities, and responsible consumption.
Okay, connecting that to the broader picture of sustainability, how is India powering its economic growth? What's the latest on energy and climate action?
The Colombia India Energy Dialogue provided some key insights. One really standout achievement is that India actually hit its 2030 target for renewable energy capacity, 200 gigawatts way back in 2022.
8 years early.
8 years ahead of schedule. It shows a rapid pace of renewable deployment. And they're building a massive 500 gigawatt interconnected national grid to handle this, aiming for 2,147 affordable power and integrating all that clean energy.
What about smaller scale renewables, like for rural areas?
There was a recent move by the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy to slightly ease the efficiency standards for solar panels used in smaller off-grid projects, especially in rural areas.
Lowering standards. Why?
The idea is to allow smaller, perhaps less advanced domestic manufacturers to participate in these projects, boosting local industry and supporting distributed renewable energy, DRE. It applies to smaller systems, less than 200 watts.
Are there concerns about that? Lower efficiency?
Yes, some concerns about potentially lower energy output or faster degradation. So strict quality enforcement will be key. But the aim is broader access and inclusion.
Makes sense. And any interesting developments globally in clean energy?
Well, the world's first commercial-scale e-methanol plant just started operating in Denmark.
E-methanol, what's that?
It's considered a low-carbon fuel. You make it by combining green hydrogen produced using renewable electricity with captured carbon dioxide.
And the benefits?
Big potential benefits. You don't necessarily need new infrastructure to use it. It can often substitute for existing fuels. It's stable, versatile. The main challenge right now is the high production cost.
Okay, interesting tech to watch. Now, shifting from energy to wildlife. What's the news on conservation efforts in India, especially for iconic species like lions?
There's positive news from the 16th census of Asiatic lions conducted in Gujarat. The population has increased significantly. They counted 891 lions.
891. What was the previous count?
It was 674 back in 2020, so that's a notable increase. The census covered 11 districts using direct counting methods. It's a real conservation success story, especially since these lions are now found only in Gujarat, mainly in the Gir forest area.
That's great news for the lions. What about broader conservation efforts? Forests, other big cats.
India has been actively showcasing its achievements in forest conservation and sustainable forest management internationally, for instance, at the UN Forum on Forests. And remember the International Big Cat Alliance, the IBCA? India has formally invited other nations to join this initiative, taking a leadership role.
Right, the Big Cat Alliance, and they often highlight their relatively low emissions, don't they?
They do. It's a point often made. India supports 17% of the world's population, but accounts for only about 3% of global carbon emissions. It frames their development path as inherently more sustainable.
What about mountain ecosystems? Himalayas.
India participated actively in the first Sagarmatha Sambaad, a dialogue hosted by Nepal focused on climate change and mountains. There, India highlighted initiatives like Project Snow Leopard, which launched in 2009.
Snow leopards. Any population estimates?
Yes. The first comprehensive snow leopard population assessment, done between 2019 and 2023, estimated there are 718 snow leopards in India. That's thought to be about 10–15% of the global population.
In the broader context of climate change in that region?
The summit emphasized that South Asia, despite having a quarter of the world's population, has contributed only about 4% of historical co-Euro emissions. India used the platform to issue a 5-point call for global action.
What did that call involve?
It urged for enhanced scientific cooperation on mountain ecosystems, building climate resilience, empowering mountain communities, providing dedicated green finance for mountain regions, and ensuring mountain perspectives are recognized in global climate talks.
Okay, from mountains to oceans, what's happening on marine conservation?
India recently hosted the second Blue Talks, which are preparatory meetings for the upcoming third UN Ocean Conference. This reflects India's focus on the blue economy.
The blue economy, sustainable use of ocean resources, right?
Exactly. Using ocean resources for economic growth while ensuring the health of marine ecosystems. The Ministry of Earth Sciences is spearheading this. The UN Ocean Conference itself aims to accelerate action to conserve oceans and use marine resources sustainably, aligning with SDG 14.
Any specific collaborative projects on ocean health?
Yes, a significant one. India and the European Union recently launched 2 major joint research projects under their Trade and Technology Council. One focuses on marine plastic litter, a huge problem, and the other on developing waste-to-hydrogen technologies. It's a joint investment of about 391 crore, showing serious collaborative intent.
Tackling plastic pollution and clean energy from waste sounds impactful. So we've covered a lot of environmental initiatives, policies, conservation, energy. How does this translate down to individual action? Is there a push for lifestyle changes?
Absolutely. That's where Mission Life comes in, Lifestyle for Environment.
Mission Life, we've heard about that before. What are the latest developments?
Well, they launched an initiative called Ideas4LiFE, developed with UNICEF's UWA platform. It's essentially a portal to crowdsource innovative ideas for products or services that can encourage people to adopt more sustainable habits.
All kind of habits.
It's organized around 7 themes. Save water, save energy, reduce waste, reduce e-waste, say no to single-use plastics, adopt sustainable food systems, and adopt healthy lifestyles. Trying to cover the key areas of daily life.
So crowdsourcing ideas for behavior change and Mission Life itself, what's the bigger goal?
It's positioned as an India-led global movement. The aim is to mobilize at least 1 billion people in India and globally to take pro-environment actions between 2022 and 2027.
1 billion people, that's a huge target.
It is. And domestically, they want at least 80% of India's villages and urban local bodies to be environment-friendly by 2028. The core idea is encapsulated in the P3 model, Pro-Planet People.
Pro-Planet People. And how do they plan to achieve this shift?
Through a 3-pronged strategy. Influencing demand, encouraging individuals to make eco-friendly choices daily, influencing supply, enabling industries and markets to respond to this changing demand, and influencing policy, shaping government and industrial policies to support sustainable consumption and production. It's about shifting from mindless consumption to mindful utilization, starting with individual choices.
A powerful call for individual responsibility. Okay, let's shift now to our third major section. We're going to unpack how India is transforming its internal systems, governance, justice, and also look at its economic resilience and growing global footprint. Where should we start with governance? Maybe the upcoming Caste Census. That sounds potentially huge.
It is potentially huge and definitely complex. India is preparing for its first comprehensive caste census since independence, going beyond just counting scheduled castes and scheduled tribes.
When is this happening? And how?
It's scheduled to start in October 2026 in Ladakh and then roll out across the rest of India from March 2027. And interestingly, they plan to incorporate a digital mode for data collection alongside traditional methods.
Why conduct a caste census now? What's the stated need?
Proponents argue there's a constitutional mandate under Article 340 to identify socially and educationally backward classes. The data is seen as crucial for evidence-based policy making, designing effective welfare schemes, ensuring equitable resource allocation.
And for things like affirmative action, reservations.
Exactly. It's needed for implementing reservation policies fairly and potentially for the subcategorization of other backward classes, or OBCs, which commissions like the Justice Rohini Commission have looked into. The idea is to create a comprehensive national database, which currently doesn't exist in a unified way.
But it sounds fraught with challenges, doesn't it?
Extremely. Data accuracy is a major concern. Previous socioeconomic and caste surveys, like the one in 2011, were plagued with errors. Classification is tricky. The same caste might be known by different names or have different statuses in different states.
And the political sensitivity.
Immense. There's always the risk that releasing caste data could fuel identity politics, lead to demands for inclusion in reservation categories, and potentially cause social unrest. We've seen agitations like the Gujarat protests in the past. Plus, collecting sensitive data digitally raises significant privacy concerns, especially in areas with low digital literacy.
So how can I navigate this? What's the suggested approach?
The consensus seems to be on needing a very careful consultative process, involving academics, sociologists, and caste groups themselves in developing the methodology, creating a comprehensive national directory of castes with expert input and public feedback. And crucially, rigorous training for the enumerators to minimize errors. It's a very delicate balancing act.
Definitely want to watch. Okay, shifting from data collection to the justice system itself. India is implementing 3 entirely new criminal laws. That sounds like a massive overhaul.
It's monumental. They're replacing the foundational pillars of the criminal justice system. The Indian Penal Code of 1860, the Criminal Procedure Code of 1973, and the Indian Evidence Act of 1872, all replaced with new Bharatiya versions.
What's the big idea behind this replacement? Modernization? Speed?
Both. The overall aim is to modernize the laws, remove outdated colonial-era provisions, and significantly speed up the delivery of justice.
What are some of the key changes that will have a real impact?
Well, for one, the laws and proceedings will be available in all 8 scheduled languages recognized in the Constitution, which dramatically improves accessibility. The controversial sedition law has been abolished. That's a major reform.
And the speed aspect, what specific measures address delays?
There are strict timelines now. Judgments in criminal cases must ideally be delivered within 45 days of the conclusion of arguments. Charges have to be framed within 60 days of the first hearing.
Faster trials? What's the overall target for case completion?
The stated goal is incredibly ambitious: to conclude the entire justice process, right up to the Supreme Court if needed, within 3 years from the filing of the initial police report, the FIR.
3 years from FIR to Supreme Court, that would be revolutionary.
It would be. Another key change is mandatory forensic investigation for any crime punishable with 7 years or more in prison. This aims to improve evidence quality and reduce reliance on confessions.
What about victims and accused? Any changes there?
Yes. First-time offenders might get bail if they've already served 1/3 of their maximum potential sentence, and victims have the right to be updated on the progress of their case every 90 days.
How is technology supporting this transition?
The National Informatics Center and ICSI has developed new digital tools, eSaksha for recording evidence digitally, Nyashruti for virtual hearings, and eSummon for electronic delivery of summons.
And has this been rolled out everywhere?
Chandigarh was highlighted as the first administrative unit, a union territory, to achieve 100% implementation, setting a benchmark. It's a massive undertaking, changing not just the laws but the entire process, aiming for speed, transparency, and a more victim-centric approach.
A fundamental shift. Now, what about reforms within the administration itself, improving how civil servants work? I heard about Mission Karmayogi.
Yes, Mission Karmayogi is a major initiative focused on capacity building for civil servants. The goal is to strengthen governance and public service delivery by making the civil services more efficient, effective, and citizen-centric.
How does it work in practice?
A key component is the IGOT Karmayogi platform. It's an integrated online training platform, and it recently crossed the milestone of having 1 crore registered civil servants using it.
1 crore. That's a huge number. What kind of training does it offer?
It's quite comprehensive. The courses are aligned with a specific Karmayogi competency model, which is apparently rooted in Indian ethos and principles. It aims to continuously upgrade skills relevant to their roles. It's built on 6 pillars covering policy, institutions, digital learning, monitoring, and so on, a holistic approach to bureaucratic reform.
Okay, and speaking of making things easier for citizens or potential citizens, any updates for overseas citizens of India?
Yes, the Ministry of Home Affairs launched a revamped OCI portal. The Overseas Citizen of India scheme itself has been around since 2005, allowing people of Indian origin, but not citizens of Pakistan or Bangladesh, certain rights.
So what's new with the portal?
The revamp aims to simplify the registration process and make it easier for existing OCI cardholders to access various services online, just making the user experience smoother and more modern.
Modernizing services. Now, looking at the highest level of governance and planning, NTIOG, what came out of their recent Governing Council meeting?
The 10th Governing Council meeting was chaired by the Prime Minister, bringing together chief ministers, lieutenant governors, union ministers, all the key stakeholders. The theme was Viksit Raja for Viksit Bharat at 2047.
Developed state for developed India by 2047. That's the long-term vision again.
Exactly. Niti Aayog, which replaced the old Planning Commission in 2015, acts as the government's main policy think tank. This meeting is where they discuss strategy and alignment between the center and the states to achieve that 2047 goal.
Any specific progress points mentioned?
One interesting data point highlighted was the significant improvement in India's ability to track progress on the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. Data availability for SDG indicators apparently jumped from 55% to 95% in just 5 years. Better data means better planning and monitoring.
That's crucial. Okay, so that's the top level. What about strengthening governance right down at the grassroots, in the villages?
For that, the Ministry of Panchayat Raj launched the Panchayat Advancement Index, or PAI 2.0 portal.
Panchayat Advancement Index? What does that measure?
It's designed to empower panchayats, the village-level governing bodies, by providing them with data for planning and governance. It allows real-time tracking of performance for about 2.5 lakh gram panchayats across the country.
How does it help them?
It helps them align their local development plans with the National Sustainable Development Goals, but adapted to the local context. They call it localization of SDGs, LDGs. The PAI 2.0 portal has apparently been streamlined, focusing on 9 key thematic areas like being poverty-free, healthy, child-friendly, having good infrastructure, good governance, etc. It promotes data-driven decision-making at the very local level.
Fostering accountability from the bottom up. Good. And there was also a small but specific rule change affecting government employees moving to PSUs.
Yes, an amendment to Rule 37 of the CCS pension rules. Basically, it clarifies that if a government employee gets absorbed into a public sector undertaking, PSU, and is later dismissed from the PSU for misconduct, they will also forfeit their pension benefits earned during their government service period. It ensures continued accountability.
Closing a potential loophole. Makes sense. And India is also showcasing these local governance models internationally.
Indeed. They presented their rural governance models, particularly a platform called Gram Manchitra, at the World Bank Land Conference 2025.
Gram Manchitra. What is that?
It's a GIS-based application launched back in 2019 to help Gram Panchayats with spatial planning for their development projects. Showcasing it at a World Bank conference themed around land tenure and climate action highlights India's efforts in using technology for better local governance and sharing those experiences globally.
Okay, let's pivot now to the economy. We've touched on governance and social aspects. What's the overall economic outlook for India, and how is it positioning itself on the world stage? The projections seem very positive.
Incredibly positive, actually. India is projected to remain the fastest-growing large economy globally for possibly the next 3 decades. The IMF predicts India will become the world's 3rd largest economy in terms of GDP by 2027.
3rd largest by 2027. That's a rapid ascent. What's driving this confidence?
Several factors: strong domestic demand, ongoing reforms, significant infrastructure investment. And as we touched on earlier, the cost of renewable energy is becoming a major advantage, around 3.3 EDO per kilowatt hour, among the lowest globally, which supports sustainable industrial growth.
And that huge investment commitment from the EFTA countries.
Yes, that's a massive vote of confidence. The European Free Trade Association, Switzerland, Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein committing to $100 billion in FDI over 15 years. That's part of their new FTA with India.
And you mentioned this is the first FTA with such a clause.
Yes, the first FTA globally, apparently, to have such a significant forward-looking binding investment commitment built into the agreement itself. The estimate is that this $100 billion could catalyze a much larger ecosystem, potentially reaching $500 billion or even attracting matching investment to total $1 trillion over time.
$1 trillion ecosystem from that deal. Wow.
It signifies huge belief in India's long-term potential. Plus, India holds the 4th largest foreign exchange reserves globally, providing a strong financial cushion. The government strategy seems focused on strengthening the economy domestically, investing heavily in infrastructure, and managing consumption flows.
Okay, let's dig into those trade deals more. The India-UK FTA finally concluded after years of talks. What are the headline points there?
It's a big one. A key practical element is the Reciprocal Social Security Agreement, the Double Contributions Convention, DCC. It stops workers from having to pay Social Security contributions in both countries if they're on temporary assignment, initially up to 3 years exemption for Indian employees in the UK. That's a real benefit for businesses and professionals.
What about market access? Tariffs?
That's the core of it. Around 99% of Indian goods exported to the UK will eventually get zero duty access. That covers almost all of India's current exports by value. In return, India will cut tariffs on about 90% of British products, with 85% becoming tariff-free within 10 years.
So significant liberalization on both sides. What about services and mobility?
Yes. The agreement reportedly makes it easier for Indian professionals to work in the UK, covering sectors like IT, financial services, architecture, and even independent professionals like yoga instructors. UK businesses also get better access to participate in government procurement tenders in India.
India's past FTAs have sometimes faced criticism, right? Growing trade deficits, low utilization. How might this UK deal be different?
That's true. Past experiences have been mixed. Some analyses showed imports from FTA partners growing much faster than exports, and utilization rates of the FTA benefits being quite low, maybe around 25%. Non-tariff barriers also remain an issue.
So what lessons might have been learned for the UK deal?
Well, the negotiation process itself seemed relatively quicker compared to, say, the ongoing India-EU talks. There seems to be a clear effort to safeguard sensitive domestic sectors. Things like dairy, some agricultural products, certain industrial goods are likely on exclusion lists or have very long phase-out periods for tariffs.
Gradual opening up.
Yes, a gradual removal of duties to give domestic industries time to adapt. And a focus on mutual benefits, like the specific quota agreed for UK car manufacturers at reduced tariffs, rather than just wide-open access. The aim seems to be a more balanced outcome.
What's the overall trade target they're aiming for?
They've set an ambitious target of hitting USD 100 billion in bilateral trade by 2030. The UK is already the sixth largest investor in India, so this FTA aims to significantly deepen that economic relationship.
Okay, beyond the UK, any other significant trade partnerships being developed?
Yes. India and Chile recently signed the terms of reference to negotiate a comprehensive economic partnership agreement, or CEPA.
Chile, what would that cover?
They already have a basic preferential trade agreement, PTA, but the CEPA aims to go much further, covering digital services investment rules, support for SMEs, and importantly, cooperation on critical minerals, which Chile has in abundance. India currently runs a trade deficit with Chile, so the CEPA would aim for a broader, more balanced economic engagement.
Expanding partnerships. Now let's look at the money flowing in. How have foreign direct investment FDI trends looked recently?
FDI inflows have remained strong. For the fiscal year 2024-25, India attracted a total of USD 81.04 billion in FDI. That's a healthy 14% increase over the previous year.
Which sectors are attracting the most investment?
The services sector continues to be the largest recipient, accounting for about 19% of FDI equity inflows. Is followed by computer software and hardware at 16%, and then trading at around 8%.
And where is the investment coming from and where is it going within India?
Geographically, Maharashtra state consistently receives the largest share, around 39% in this period, followed by Karnataka, 13%, and Delhi, 12%. In terms of source countries, Singapore remains the top investor, 30%, followed by Mauritius, 17%, though much of that is often investment routed through Mauritius, and then the U.S., 11%.
What's the bigger picture on FDI over the last decade or so?
The cumulative FDI inflow over the 11 years from 2014 to 2025 has been substantial, totaling nearly USD 749 billion. And the investment is coming from a wider range of countries. Now 112 source countries invested during this period, showing diversification.
Strong investment flows. What about the other side of the coin, India's export performance?
Exports have also hit record highs. Total exports, goods and services combined, reached about $824.9 billion in 2024-25. That's a growth of just over 6% from the previous year. Services exports performed particularly well, and merchandise exports, excluding petroleum, also set a new record. It indicates growing competitiveness.
Okay, let's turn to industrial developments within India. How is the government supporting key sectors like defense PSUs and also the startup ecosystem?
In the defense sector, 3 Defense Ministry public sector undertakings, Munitions India Limited, MIL, Armored Vehicles, Nigel Limited, AVNL, and India Optel Limited, IOL, were recently granted Miniratna Category I status.
Miniratna status, what does that mean for them?
It grants them significantly enhanced financial autonomy. These companies were actually formed when the old Ordnance Factory Board was restructured into 7 distinct DPSUs back in 2021, precisely to give them more operational freedom and encourage growth. Miniratna Category I status allows them to make investment decisions up to 500 crore or their net worth, whichever is less, without needing government approval for every project.
So more freedom to invest, innovate, form partnerships.
Exactly. They can enter into joint ventures, technology collaborations more easily. To get this status, they need to have been profitable for 3 years and made a pre-tax profit of at least 30 crore in one of those years. It's about empowering them to be more agile and competitive.
And for startups, any new support measures?
Yes, the government approved 187 startups for tax exemption under Section 80 IAC of the Income Tax Act. This is a pretty significant benefit. It offers a 100% tax deduction on profits for any 3 consecutive years within their first 10 years of incorporation.
Has eligibility changed?
Yes. Crucially, the eligibility window was extended in the last budget. Startups incorporated up until April 1st, 2030 can now potentially qualify for this exemption. They evaluate startups based on innovation, scalability, market potential, and job creation potential. It's a clear incentive to foster entrepreneurship.
Good support for business. What about modernizing essential public services, like the public distribution system for food grains? That reaches hundreds of millions.
Right. The PDS is massive, serving over 81 crore beneficiaries. The Ministry of Consumer Affairs launched 3 new digital platforms to improve its functioning: Depot Darpan, Anamitra, and Anasayata.
What do these platforms do?
Depot Darpan is a portal for digital self-assessment and monitoring of the storage depots run by the Food Corporation of India, FCI, and the Central Warehousing Corporation, CWC. It aims to improve standards and efficiency, aiming for an excellent grading, backed by significant investment in depot modernization.
Okay, monitoring the storage side. What about the distribution end?
Anamitra is a mobile app designed for the Fair Price Shop, FPS dealers, the ration shops, and also for the food inspectors and officers. It helps with tracking stock, monitoring distribution, geotagged inspections, making the whole process more transparent. It's being piloted in several states.
In Anasayata.
That's specifically a grievance redressal platform for beneficiaries of the PMGKA Free Food Grain Scheme. If people have issues or complaints, this platform provides a dedicated channel to resolve them. Also being piloted, it's all about using technology for better transparency, efficiency, and accountability in this vital system.
Leveraging tech for public service delivery. Let's quickly touch on government finances. What did the provisional accounts for the last fiscal year, FY 2024-25, show? Any key takeaways?
The provisional figures suggest the government largely met its budget targets. Total expenditure was very close to the revised estimate at 98.7%. This includes both revenue expenditure, like salaries, subsidies, interest payments, and capital expenditure, investment in assets, which is also substantial.
And on the income side, receipts.
Total receipts were also close to the target, at 97.8% of the RE. This includes tax revenue, non-tax revenue, and non-debt capital receipts. Overall, the figures point towards fiscal stability and adherence to the budget plan.
What about GDP growth for that period?
The estimates showed real GDP growth around 6.5% for the full fiscal year, with nominal growth, including inflation, at 9.8%. The final quarter, Q4, showed strong real GDP growth at 7.4%, generally indicating continued economic momentum.
Okay. And one last detail on finance, a change in the income tax return forms affecting capital gains.
Yes, a small but relevant change for many investors. The new ITR Forms 1 and 4, typically used by individuals with income up to 50 lakh, now include a specific section for reporting long-term capital gains, LTCG, from listed equities, even if the gain is below the exemption limit.
So you have to report it even if it's not taxed.
Previously, smaller gains might not have been explicitly reported in these simpler forms. Now, gains up to 1.25 lakh from listed equities need to be declared here. Gains above that threshold are taxed at 12.5%. It streamlines reporting and improves data collection on these types of gains.
Okay, understood. Now, broadening out again, with all this domestic activity, how is India engaging globally? Projecting influence, securing interests? Let's start with BRICS.
India has been very active within the BRICS Forum. At the recent BRICS Energy Ministers meeting in Brazil, the theme was Empowering Global South Cooperation. India used this platform to showcase its own clean energy achievements.
What achievements did they highlight?
Things like reaching 475 GW of electricity capacity in 2025, aiming for 900 GW by 2032, being the third largest producer of solar and wind energy, achieving 20% ethanol blending in petrol, and the ambitious target of 100 GW of nuclear power by 2047. They also emphasized the role of the Global Biofuels Alliance, which India initiated.
So positioning itself as a leader in clean energy transition within the Global South?
Exactly. They also updated the BRICS roadmap for energy cooperation and confirmed India will chair BRICS in 2026, hosting the energy gathering then.
What about BRICS engagement beyond energy? Trade.
At the 15th BRICS Trade Ministers meeting, India made a notable proposal called 30 for 30.
30 for 30.
Yes, suggesting 30 specific trade reform ideas for the World Trade Organization, WTO, to consider, coinciding with the WTO's 30th anniversary. It shows India taking a proactive role in shaping global trade rules.
And highlighting its domestic strengths.
Absolutely. They emphasize the scale and importance of India's MSME sector, nearly 6 crore registered MSMEs, employing over 25 crore people and contributing almost 46% of total exports. They also pointed to the massive growth in internet users in India, reaching over 95 crore by March 2024, underscoring the digital transformation powering its economy.
Now, the BRICS group also has its own development bank, the New Development Bank, NDB. Any news there?
Yes, the NDB recently welcomed Algeria as its 9th member. The bank was set up by the original BRICS countries back in 2014.
What's the main purpose of the NDB?
It's primarily to mobilize funding for infrastructure and sustainable development projects in emerging markets and developing countries, EMDCs. Its members now span beyond the core BRICS nations to include Bangladesh, UAE, Egypt, and now Algeria. Uruguay is also a prospective member.
How important are regional banks like the NDB today?
They're increasingly significant. They help bridge the huge investment gaps in infrastructure, promote sustainable development aligned with national priorities. India, for example, has about 20 ongoing NDB-funded projects worth nearly $5 billion. They also foster regional integration and strengthen South-South cooperation. India is a founding member of both the NDB and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIB.
Okay, looking beyond BRICS, any other key leadership roles India is taking on in regional organizations?
India recently assumed the chairmanship of the Asian Productivity Organization, APO, for the 2025-26 term. India was a founding member back in 1961.
The APO, what does it focus on?
As the name suggests, its main goal is to contribute to the socio-economic development of the Asia-Pacific region by enhancing productivity among its 21 member economies. Chairing it gives India a platform to shape that agenda.
Shifting to security cooperation now, what's happening with the Quad countries, India, US, Japan, Australia?
They recently conducted a tabletop exercise in Honolulu, Hawaii, focused on their Indo-Pacific Logistics Network, or IPLN.
IPLN, what's that for?
The idea behind IPLN is for the Quad members to be able to share logistics capabilities, specifically to support civilian responses during natural disasters or humanitarian crises. It aims to make their collective response faster and more efficient across the Indo-Pacific, leveraging military logistics for civilian good, essentially.
Makes sense. Now, on more sensitive security issues, nuclear oversight and counterterrorism, what's been India's focus?
There was a recent statement by India's Minister of Defense urging the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, to provide oversight for Pakistan's nuclear arsenal.
IAEA oversight of Pakistan's nukes. That's a strong call.
It is. The IAEA, established back in 1957, is the UN's watchdog for nuclear safety and security, verifying compliance with treaties like the Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT. India, Pakistan, and Israel, of course, haven't signed the NPT. This call reflects ongoing regional security concerns and a push for greater transparency.
What about counterterrorism efforts at the UN?
India officials recently briefed the UN Security Council's 1267 Sanctions Committee. This committee specifically deals with sanctions against groups like ISIS and al-Qaeda. The briefing focused on the Resistance Front, TRF, a group operating in Kashmir, highlighting India's ongoing efforts to combat terrorism and its links to international networks.
Engaging directly on specific threats. Finally, let's address a very modern security challenge, the link between cryptocurrency and traditional informal money transfer systems like Hawala. The Supreme Court even commented on this.
Yes, the Supreme Court observed that Bitcoin trading, in the absence of clear regulation in India, resembles a kind of refined Hawala. This cryptocurrency Hawala nexus is a growing concern globally.
How does this nexus work? What's the link?
Essentially, illicit actors are using the anonymity and borderless nature of cryptocurrencies combined with the trust-based, undocumented network of traditional Hawala operators. It creates a powerful channel to launder money, finance illegal activities, and bypass formal banking systems and regulations. The Enforcement Directorate, ED, in India recently uncovered a case involving 1,300 crore allegedly routed this way.
Why are crypto and Hawala such a good match for criminals?
Crypto offers pseudo-anonymity and makes tracing funds difficult, especially with privacy-focused coins. Hawala relies on trust and minimal paperwork. Both operate outside the traditional regulated financial system. For those in unstable regions or trying to evade sanctions, it's appealing. Blockchain's distributed ledger can even, ironically, reinforce the trust needed for Hawala to work at scale.
What are the main concerns arising from this nexus?
The biggest is the difficulty in tracking illicit financial flows. It fuels money laundering, terror financing. There have been documented cases. It creates huge regulatory challenges because the legal status of crypto is still evolving in many places, including India. It facilitates tax evasion. And there are security risks like hacking of wallets and theft of funds.
It sounds incredibly difficult to combat. What's the proposed way forward?
It requires a multi-pronged approach. Definitely more international cooperation and intelligence sharing, using technology itself, blockchain analytics tools to trace transactions. Critically, strengthening regulations around virtual currencies, implementing clear AML-CFT, anti-money laundering, combating the financing of terrorism rules, perhaps drawing from international frameworks like FATF guidelines or the EU's MiCA framework.
So regulation, technology, and cooperation.
Yes, a comprehensive strategy. Alongside this, India's Department of Telecommunications has introduced a new tool called the Financial Fraud Risk Indicator, FRI, specifically to tackle mobile-based cyber fraud.
FRI. How does that work?
It analyzes various data points reports from the National Cybercrime Reporting Portal, NCRP, the Chakshu portal for reporting suspicious communications, inputs from banks to classify mobile numbers based on their association with financial fraud into risk categories: medium, high, very high. This can help telecom operators and banks take preventative action.
Trying to get ahead of the fraudsters. Is mobile fraud a big problem?
Huge. Reports indicate around 3,207 crore was lost to cyber financial frauds in India between 2020 and 2024, from over 5.8 lakh cases. Common scams involve fake KYC updates, fake customer care numbers, UPI fraud, digital arrest scams, fake investment schemes. The list is long. So tools like FRI are becoming essential.
A constant battle, it seems. Wow, okay. We have covered an immense amount of ground today, from health initiatives to space biology, governance reforms, economic deals, global engagement. As we wrap up this deep dive, it really strikes you just how dynamic things are in India right now.
It really is a period of intense activity on multiple fronts. What stands out, I think, is that dual narrative we've seen throughout. On one hand, ambitious goals, real progress, significant achievements hitting renewable targets early, eliminating diseases, sealing major trade deals.
Right, lots of forward momentum.
But on the other hand, persistent, deep-rooted challenges remain. Inequality is stark, despite the growth. Implementing massive reforms like the new criminal laws or the Caste Census is incredibly complex. And new challenges, like that crypto Hawala nexus or sophisticated cyber fraud, are constantly emerging.
It really underscores the need for critical thinking, doesn't it? Not just taking headlines at face value.
Absolutely. You have to see the connections, the complexities, the trade-offs. How does progress in one area impact another? How do domestic policies connect to global ambitions? It's all interconnected.
And that brings us to a final thought, maybe something for you, our listener, to mull over. As India pushes towards that goal of Viksit Bharat, a developed nation by 2047, aiming for global leadership, how do all these individual pieces fit together? How do advancements in health, science, governance, and the economy collectively shape not just the future for 1.4 billion Indians, but also potentially reshape global cooperation, development, and power dynamics?
It's a profound question. The scale of change in India inevitably has global ripple effects.
Indeed. Something to keep watching, keep analyzing. We hope this deep dive has given you some valuable insights and context to do just that.
Hopefully equipping you to cut through some of that noise we talked about at the beginning.
Exactly. Thank you for joining us on the deep dive.